Ryan, thank you very much for sitting with me this afternoon so that we can go over some questions that I have for you in regards to being a literacy coach. So I guess that's kind of where I want to start is what does it mean to you to be a literacy coach or a literacy leader within our school and in the larger body?
Okay, so the purpose of a literacy coach is to continuously raise the level of practice and theory of the teachers in the building, because we know that teacher satisfaction particularly comes from continuous growth and having that idea that you're continuously growing and learning something new and being challenged, because once you're not challenged, you're not growing, and then you are not excited about your profession. And on the other hand, the other piece is to continuously raise the achievement of the students in the school. So delivering, if you help teachers become good decision makers, have a good strong theory base, and work with them on their practice, that will raise the level of success for students in their classroom, which is our ultimate goal.
And how do you feel about that in regards to, you said that's the different role. How do you feel in particular to being at Fort Howard, like within our community here, especially with we've been doing a lot of work with our turnaround process, which puts a lot of pressure and really high stakes within our building especially. How do you feel about that in regards to your role, especially over the transition over the last few years?
Right. Well, that sense of urgency is never more stronger than it's been at Fort Howard. But that's okay. And that means we just can't stay where we are at any point at all. Like we have to, and not let things go too long. We have to address things as soon as we see them. The other piece, though, that I've been really noticing with our turnaround at Fort Howard is that it's not just about the literacy and the teaching that happens, because so many of our students come with, it's that teaching for chronic stress that's in their lives. And if you don't deal with that, the academics won't matter. It's everything comes through the brainstem, the oldest part of our brain, which is the emotional control area. So new learning and experiences filter through that, and if that's all clogged up, it's going to be difficult. So that's one of the big things I've learned, and I wouldn't have known until I came here and experienced it, was that part of the equation, that it's not just the best teaching. We know that teachers make the difference, and it's not just in their academics, but it's in their work with developing relationships with kids and how to deal with the kids that are in chronic stress and trauma.
So in order to even get to that literacy portion, academic portions, you have to go with that.
Yeah, and that's why I think our first school goal was culture and climate and growth mindset for our students, because they were very much wanting to shut down or or they felt making an attempt if they weren't right or wrong. It was about right or wrong, not about process.
Have you seen then, since we started that, have you seen throughout that students are starting to pick that up a little bit more? Like you're working right now in the 4th grade classroom, and that, especially, we know that group was a really challenging group and still is a challenging group. But do you think that has contributed to them being able to get to some of those academics finally as they're in the 4th grade with you?
I think so. Just today, when I just finished teaching a lesson in there, and they all felt, I was a little concerned because we tried something new, a sentence imitation. I modeled, they tried one on their own, and then they all shared. And I was concerned that some wouldn't want to share because I knew some of them didn't quite get the structure, but they all felt empowered and comfortable to actually put forward that first effort, even if they weren't. So I think it has made a difference, because I didn't see kids shutting down or kids not willing to try. They all made attempts with that, and it was the first time they were thinking in that kind of way in that classroom. So I think it has made a difference.
Yeah, that's huge. That's really, really great that you've been able to see that transfer into the classroom within that, especially as you're working with the classroom teacher in that setting. So, and especially in your role too as a literacy coach, if I'm correct, you aren't the first person, you aren't the main relationship builder, you aren't the classroom teacher. No. You don't have your set management skills or your way of managing maybe a little bit different.
Right.
So that's a challenge. Is that a challenge when you go into classrooms? as you go into the different classrooms, because all the teachers have different styles and ways of doing things?
Yeah, slightly different levels of tolerance, maybe for noise or for off-task behaviors, for example, and also different systems. Although I think at Fort Howard, we are closer to being on the same page than anywhere I've seen before, because we built this school together. We built a common vision, a common set of beliefs together. It's played out a little bit differently, but if we have the same beliefs and we come at it at different angles, it's fine. But as a literacy coach, that is a challenge. Like this morning, I went in and modeled a lesson in a kindergarten room. The first time I've ever worked with those kids. I observed them yesterday, but the first time I've ever worked with them. So that's always a challenge as a literacy coach is you can fall flat on your face, but you're doing very easily because you don't know the kids maybe as well as you would like, and you're modeling in front of your colleagues, really, because you're not an administrator, you're a colleague. You have to be comfortable with just putting yourself out there, being firm, believing in what you know, and go with it, because if you hesitate, you won't get anywhere.
For the teacher or the students,
Right.
in that regard, right?
Right, because you have to have that common experience, like when I'm modeling, that the classroom teacher and I can have that conversation then about what do we notice the kids doing because of what we were doing, and that's what we need to pay attention to.
Having those conversations is very important. Following up on lessons and going in and, like you said, you're modeling, but you're also wanting that close contact with the teachers to be able to, because ultimately they're the ones that you're working with to be able to improve.
And they're the ones that are working with the students then.
Very good, thank you.
Sure.
I do have a question in our class that I'm working on right now, my grad class. We have a question that we came up with that we would want to do more research on. So I wanted to pose the question to you and see if you had brought any resources that you think maybe would be helpful for myself when I'm thinking about that question and doing my deeper research. I was hoping maybe you would have some direction for me to move in.
Okay.
So the question is, how can explicit instruction and modeling promote students' transfer of skills within a literacy framework?
Okay. Yeah, I did do some thinking, and just as you were talking, I thought of some more resources for you. So,
great.
The first thing I thought about was what Linda Dorn and Tammy Jones talk about in Apprenticeship in Literacy, 2nd edition. And we've talked about this before at our school, but that idea of a traditional apprenticeship and then a cognitive apprenticeship. In a traditional apprenticeship, I don't know what you call the master, is modeling how to do something, right? And then when the apprentice takes it on, the master is coaching. But it's usually around a skill, how to do something in a traditional apprenticeship, whether it be how to weld 2 pipes together if you're in the plumbing trade or whatever it is. But we're talking about a cognitive apprenticeship. So the role of modeling is even more important, because when you think cognitive, you can't see it. So it's all in the brain. It's invisible. So we have to make visible for our students the kinds of thinking that we want them to do. So when we're modeling, we are thinking aloud. How to problem solve, how to work through things, how to think about text that they're reading, how to think about being a writer or an author or being a reader. And that's really important. And then as kids are engaging in that activity and that thinking, you're there beside them, coaching them along the way by prompting, by asking questions, by getting them to explain things. And then you're moving along to transfer. Then in that you expect them to try it out in different settings, which leads me to interventions that work. Because we know that struggling students tend to compartmentalize everything. Like, they don't realize that the skill they learn maybe in an intervention can be used somewhere else. They just have that learning for that situation in that setting. So when we're teaching for transfer, we have to help students understand that their knowledge is generalizable. It can be applied to many different areas. And the one thing I was thinking about is specifically with word work. For example, in guided reading or in writing, the language we use is really important. And when you go to the letters and words chapter and look at some of the examples of the language that is used when you look at the instructional framework on page 103, for example, you're actually telling students, now, you're doing this word work piece, so they're understanding a principle, whether it be how to change the onset or how to take apart multisyllabic words and read them. But then you say, now when you're reading and you come to a word like this, you need to try that. When you're writing, you need to listen for the parts and write it in parts. When you're reading, you need to look for the parts that might help you. And actually getting them to engage in that guided practice on the spot. Then the follow-up becomes when you conference with kids and you're listening to them read and you're watching them and talking to them about their writing, that they have to, you have to be prompting and noticing for transfer. Because to just even just say those words and do it in isolation isn't enough. You have to support them using continuous text, whether it be reading or writing. So that these two resources are great and they're really practical. Even more, the Nurturing Independent Learners from Mitchenbaum and Beimiller has a whole chapter on transfer, and they actually talk about high road and low road transfer. We've been talking about that at our school the last month or two. In that when we think about transfer, we kind of get stuck in low road. I teach it, this skill, and you just basically duplicate it, but doing it on your own. High road transfer is when you really change up the context or the setting. So for example, if you're teaching students how to read an informational text and notice the descriptive structure or the compare and contrast structure, but your unit of study in science or social studies is on, let's say, electricity, you might teach that structure in reading or writing, but with a different topic at least. So maybe you teach it with animals, but they have to apply it in a totally different context then. And I noticed that kids too, in terms of transfer, what do they think reading and writing is? And it's often to write in a response log, to be able to summarize or whatever. So we have to make sure, this kind of a little tangent, but as we're dealing with transfer, we don't want to give the idea that this technique, this skill is the reason we read. That's not the reason we read. It's all about either enjoyment or getting information. And I'm just sliding over here to get my computer because I just remembered, and I can share this link with you or links with you. Linda Dorn at one of my at some trainings I had, shared some articles on transfer that were really helpful. Would you be interested in them?
I would love that.
Okay, let me just do a quick search here on transfer.
Perfect.
So theories that guide our instruction: successful transfer, unsuccessful transfer, far transfer, near transfer, or the idea of high road, low road. So this is an old article, but it's really, really helpful. So I will share this link with you, but you look at the title: students often fail to apply knowledge and skills learned in one context to other situations. With well-designed instruction, we can increase the likelihood that they will.
That's
excellent article.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have a couple more. So I will just send those to you via Evernote, which is my note-keeping program.
Great.
But you have to model that thinking and how to transfer. So you can't just expect kids to do it. Some will, but we have to make sure that we're actually saying, now when you are problem solving in this, what could you do? And then we also had that talk about literacy talks. You weren't at that session, but getting kids to verbalize the strategies and things they're using and when they use them. That's why share time cannot be skipped in reading and writing workshops, because that's where you get to hear about how all the kids were transferred and they hear each other.
So that's really important that that first and foremost, the teacher has to be able to understand and articulate the why behind the purpose behind what reading and writing and everything along with that, in order to even attempt to share it with their students. And then in regards to they need to use that explicit language, explicit modeling, in order for the students to do so. And that's something that we've noticed, and part of the reason why I chose this question is because there are teachers in our building quite a bit who are like, the students can do it in this area, but they won't do it in this when they're working independently, or they don't do it in this setting. So by us focusing in and honing in on their awareness that that's where we are, and what can we do about it. So thank you very much, Brian, for sitting with me and being able to talk through some of sharing some different resources with me on transfer, but then also just telling me about more about what you feel about being as a literacy coach. So
You are so welcome.
thank
Good
you.
luck. Take care.